Forest Lawn Cemetery, Las Vegas, March 3, 1976, 10:00 a.m. The funeral was small. 17 people stood around an open grave under a gray Nevada sky. A priest read from a worn Bible. A woman in a black dress, the widow, clutched a handkerchief and stared at the casket like she was waiting for it to tell her what to do next. And in the back, away from the family, stood Dean Martin. He wore a dark suit, no sunglasses, no entourage. He'd driven himself, which he almost never did anymore. His Rolls-Royce was parked on the gravel path 50 yards away, looking absurdly out of place among the Fords and Chevys. Nobody had expected him to come. The man in the casket was named Joey Calabrese. Joey, to those who knew him. He'd been a janitor at the Sands Hotel for 31 years. He mopped floors. He cleaned toilets. He emptied ashtrays in the casino at 4 in the morning when the last gamblers were stumbling toward the exits. Joey Calabrese had never been famous. He'd never been rich. He'd never done anything that would get his name in a newspaper or his face on a television screen. He'd just shown up every night for 31 years and done his job. And now he was dead. Heart attack. 67 years old. Found slumped against his mop bucket in the service corridor behind the Copa room at 3:47 a.m. on February 28, 1976. The paramedics said he was probably gone before he hit the floor. The Sands Hotel sent flowers, a nice arrangement, lilies and carnations. The card said, "With deepest sympathy from the Sands Hotel family." Nobody from the Sands came to the funeral. Nobody except Dean Martin. The widow, Maria Calabrese, didn't understand at first. When she saw the Rolls-Royce pull up, she thought maybe someone had made a wrong turn. When she saw Dean Martin step out, she thought she was dreaming. Why would Dean Martin come to Joey's funeral? Joey had never mentioned knowing Dean Martin. He'd never bragged about celebrity encounters. He'd just come home every morning, eaten his breakfast, kissed his wife, and gone to sleep. For 31 years. Maria walked over to Dean after the service. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. She was 64 years old and had just buried the only man she'd ever loved. "Mr. Martin?" Dean turned. His eyes were wet. "Mrs. Calabrese, I'm so sorry for your loss. I don't understand. Did you know my Joey?" Dean was quiet for a moment. "Your husband saved my life, Mrs. Calabrese." Maria stared at him. "What?" 30 years ago. He said something to me that I never forgot. Something that kept me going when I wanted to quit. Joey never told me. He probably didn't think it was important. That's the thing about men like your husband. They don't know how much they matter. Dean reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. It's not much, but I want you to have it." Maria took the envelope with trembling hands. "Mr. Martin, I can't. Please, let me do this. It's the least I owe him." Dean squeezed her hand gently, then walked back to his car. Maria opened the envelope later that night, alone in the house that suddenly felt too big. Inside was a check for $50,000 and a handwritten note for Joey, who saw me when I was invisible and reminded me that I wasn't Dean. To understand why Dean Martin drove himself to a janitor's funeral in March 1976, you need to go back 30 years, to a night when Dean Martin almost quit show business forever. January 1946, the 500 Club in Atlantic City. Dean was 28 years old. He'd been bouncing around nightclubs for years, singing wherever they'd let him, sleeping in his car when he couldn't afford a room, eating one meal a day when money was tight. He wasn't famous yet. He wasn't even close to famous. That night, he was the opening act for a comedian nobody remembers anymore. The crowd was small, maybe 40 people. Most of them were drunk. Most of them weren't listening. Dean sang his heart out anyway. 3 songs, 15 minutes, polite applause. Then the comedian came on, and the crowd actually started paying attention. After the show, Dean sat alone in the dressing room, if you could call it that. It was really just a storage closet with a mirror and a bare light bulb. The walls were thin enough to hear the crowd laughing at the comedian's jokes. Dean stared at his reflection. 28 years old, broke, unknown, singing to people who didn't care. He thought about his wife Betty, thought about his son Craig, just a baby, thought about how he'd promised them a better life and had delivered nothing but empty pockets and broken promises. He thought about quitting, Not just quitting the 500 Club. Quitting everything. Going back to Steubenville. Getting a job in the steel mills, like his father wanted. Forgetting the stupid dream of being a singer. He was still staring at the mirror when the door opened. A janitor walked in. Short, stocky, maybe 40 years old. Dark hair going gray at the temples. He was carrying a mop and a bucket. "Sorry," the janitor said. "Didn't know anyone was still in here." "It's fine," Dean said. "I was just leaving." But he didn't move. The janitor started mopping the floor around him. The slosh of the mop, the squeak of the bucket wheels, the only sounds in the room. Then the janitor spoke. "I heard you sing tonight." Dean looked up. "Yeah? You're good." Dean laughed. It was a bitter sound. Tell that to the 40 people who weren't listening. The janitor stopped mopping. He leaned on his mop handle and looked at Dean with eyes that had seen a lot of dreamers come and go. "You know what I've learned working in places like this?" "What?" "The ones who make it aren't always the most talented. They're the ones who don't quit. That's the whole secret. Just don't quit." Dean stared at him. "You don't know anything about me. I know you're sitting alone in a storage closet feeling sorry for yourself. I know that look. I've seen it 100 times. Singer comes in, bombs, sits in here wondering if they should give up." The janitor shrugged. "Most of them do. Most of them go home and get regular jobs and spend the rest of their lives wondering what if. Maybe that's the smart thing to do. Maybe. But you're not going to do it." "How do you know?" The janitor smiled. "Because you're still sitting here. The ones who are going to quit, they leave right away. They can't stand to be in the building another minute. But you're still here. You're still thinking. That means you're not done yet." He went back to mopping. Dean watched him work. The methodical movements. The quiet efficiency. A man who had probably mopped 1,000 floors and would mop 1,000 more. "What's your name?" Dean asked. Joey Calabrese." "I'm Dean." "I know who you are." Joey grinned. "I read the schedule." Dean almost smiled. "Joey, why do you care? You don't know me. Why do you give a damn whether I quit or not?" Joey stopped mopping again. He looked at Dean for a long moment. "Because I quit once. 20 years ago. I was going to be a boxer. Pretty good, too. Had some people interested in managing me. But I got scared. Got married. Got a job. Told myself I'd go back to it someday." He gestured at the mop in his hands. "Someday never came. You regret it?" "Every single day." Joey's voice was quiet now. "I love my wife. I love my kids. But there's a part of me that never stopped wondering. What if I'd kept going? What if I'd taken one more fight? Would I be mopping floors at 2 in the morning? Or would I be somebody?" He looked at Dean. "You've got something, kid. I don't know what it is exactly. But when you were up there singing, something happened. The room got a little quieter. People leaned in a little closer. That's not nothing. That's the start of something." Dean didn't know what to say. Joey picked up his bucket. "Don't quit, Dean. Whatever you do, don't quit. The world's full of people who quit too soon. Don't be one of them." He walked out of the room, the squeak of his bucket wheels fading down the hallway. Dean sat alone in that storage closet for another hour. Then he got up, went back to his crappy hotel room, and started practicing for the next night's show. He didn't quit. 2 years later, Dean Martin teamed up with a skinny kid named Jerry Lewis. They became the biggest act in America. Dean became one of the most famous entertainers in the world. He never saw Joey Calabrese again. Or so he thought. Fast forward to 1954. 8 years after that night in Atlantic City. Dean was headlining at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. Martin and Lewis were at the peak of their fame. The Copa Room was packed every night. People flew in from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles just to see them perform. Dean was walking through the service corridor after a show when he saw a janitor mopping the floor. He almost walked past. Then he stopped. "Joey?" The janitor looked up. He was older now, early 50s. Grayer, a little heavier. But it was the same face, the same eyes. "Do I know you?" Dean laughed. "You don't recognize me." Joey squinted. Then his eyes went wide. "Holy. You're Dean Martin. The Dean Martin. And you're Joey Calabrese. The Joey Calabrese." Joey's face flushed red. "Mr. Martin, I had no idea." "Joey, stop. You told me not to quit, remember? Atlantic City, 1946. The 500 Club. You came into my dressing room and told me not to quit. Joey stared at him. That was you. That was me. I knew there was something about you, but I never thought. You didn't know I'd become famous. You just saw a kid who was about to give up. And you said something. One sentence. Don't quit. That's all it took. Dean put a hand on Joey's shoulder. I never forgot you, Joey. I've thought about that night 100 times, 1,000 times. When things got hard, when the business was crushing me, I'd remember what you said. The ones who make it are the ones who don't quit. Joey's eyes were wet now. Mr. Martin, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just know that you mattered. You probably thought you were just a janitor mopping a floor, but you weren't. You were the guy who kept Dean Martin in show business. From that night on, whenever Dean performed at the Sands, he made sure Joey was taken care of. Better shifts, better pay. A seat at the bar after shows where he could have a drink on Dean's tab. Nobody at the Sands knew why Dean Martin had a soft spot for the old janitor. Nobody asked. When Dean Martin wanted something, it happened. That's how it worked. For 22 years, Dean and Joey had a quiet friendship. They didn't see each other often. Dean was always traveling. Films, television, concerts around the world. Joey was always working. The night shift. The same mop. The same corridors. But whenever Dean was at the Sands, he'd find Joey. They'd talk for a few minutes. Dean would ask about Joey's family. Joey would ask about Dean's shows. Two men from completely different worlds, connected by one conversation in a storage closet 30 years ago. Joey never told anyone about their friendship. He never bragged, never name-dropped, never tried to leverage his connection to Dean Martin for anything. That wasn't who he was. When Dean heard that Joey had died, heart attack, found next to his mop bucket, he canceled a golf game, got in his car, and drove to the funeral alone. No publicist, no photographers, no announcement. Just a man paying respects to another man who had mattered more than anyone knew. At the funeral, after Dean had given Maria the envelope and walked back to his car, a young man approached him. Joey's son, Vincent, 32 years old. He looked like his father, the same stocky build, the same kind eyes. Mr. Martin? Dean turned. Yes, I'm Vincent, Joey's son. I know who you are. Your father talked about you all the time. Vincent's voice cracked. My dad never told us he knew you. Not once. My mom just showed me the check and the note. I don't understand. What did he do? What did my father do that was worth $50,000? Dean looked at the young man standing in front of him, a man who was about to spend the rest of his life missing his father. Your father saw me, Vincent. That's what he did. I don't understand. I was nobody in 1946. A broke singer in a crappy club about to quit and go home. Your father was the only person in that building who stopped and talked to me. Not because he wanted something, not because he thought I was going to be famous, just because he saw a kid who was struggling and decided to say something kind. Dean's voice was thick now. That's rare, Vincent. That's so goddamn rare. Most people walk past. Most people don't see the ones who are struggling. They're too busy with their own lives. But your father saw me. He took 60 seconds out of his night to tell me not to quit. And that 60 seconds changed my entire life. Vincent was crying. He never told us. Of course he didn't. Because your father didn't think he did anything special. He just thought he was being decent. But that's the thing about decent people, Vincent. They change the world and they don't even know it. Dean put a hand on Vincent's shoulder. Your father was a great man. Not because he was famous. Not because he was rich. Because he saw the invisible people. The ones everyone else walked past. He saw them and he treated them like they mattered. He looked back at the grave. That's the rarest thing in the world, Vincent. And your father had it. Don't ever forget that. Dean drove home in silence. The Las Vegas Strip glittered in the distance. The Sands Hotel, where he'd performed hundreds of shows, rose against the skyline. The world that Dean Martin had conquered, the fame, the money, the adulation of millions, all of it visible through his windshield. But Dean wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about a storage closet in Atlantic City, a bare light bulb, a mop bucket squeaking across a dirty floor, a stranger who took 60 seconds to say something kind. Don't quit, Dean. Whatever you do, don't quit. That's all it took. One sentence. One moment of being seen. Dean Martin spent his career performing for thousands of people. He filled arenas, sold millions of records, starred in dozens of films. His face was on magazine covers. His voice was on radios around the world. But the person who mattered most, the person who changed everything, was a janitor nobody had ever heard of. A man who mopped floors for 31 years and died next to his bucket at 3:47 in the morning. A man whose name was Joey Calabrese. Years later, in 1988, Dean was interviewed for a television special about his career. The interviewer asked him about his influences, about the people who had shaped him as an entertainer. Dean mentioned Bing Crosby. He mentioned Frank Sinatra. He mentioned Jerry Lewis and the early days of their partnership. Then he paused. But the person who really made me who I am? You've never heard of him. Who? A janitor. Guy named Joey Calabrese. He told me not to quit when I was about to give up. One sentence changed my life. The interviewer was surprised. A janitor? Dean smiled. That famous sleepy smile. That's the thing about life. The big moments don't always come from the people you expect. Sometimes they come from the guy mopping the floor at 2 in the morning. The person everyone else walks past without seeing. He looked directly into the camera. Pay attention to those people. The invisible ones. The ones doing the jobs nobody notices. Because you never know. One of them might say the one thing you need to hear, and it might change everything. The interviewer moved on to other topics, other questions, other stories. But that moment, Dean Martin talking about a janitor on national television, stayed with the people who saw it. Some of them wrote letters to the network. They wanted to know more about Joey Calabrese. They wanted to know if the story was true. It was true. Every word of it. Maria Calabrese used the $50,000 to pay off her mortgage and live comfortably for the rest of her life. She died in 1991, at the age of 79. She's buried next to Joey at Forest Lawn. Vincent Calabrese became a social worker. He spent his career helping homeless people in Las Vegas, the invisible ones his father had taught him to see. He retired in 2015. He has 3 grandchildren now, and every year, on the anniversary of Joey's death, Vincent visits his father's grave and says the same thing. Thank you, Pop, for teaching me to see people. Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995. His funeral was attended by hundreds. Frank Sinatra, Shirley MacLaine, celebrity after celebrity, paying respects to the king of cool. But somewhere in the crowd, unnoticed by the photographers, stood an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. Vincent Calabrese, the son of a janitor. He'd driven across town to be there. Not because he expected to be recognized, not because he wanted anything, just to pay respects to the man who had shown up alone at his father's funeral, 19 years earlier, just to close the circle. After the service, Vincent didn't approach the family, didn't try to talk to the celebrities. He just stood at the edge of the crowd, said a quiet prayer, and walked back to his car. On the way home, he thought about what Dean had said at his father's grave all those years ago. That's the thing about decent people. They change the world, and they don't even know it. Vincent smiled. Dean Martin had been talking about Joey, but he could have been talking about himself. 2 men who saw the invisible ones. 2 men who understood that the measure of a person isn't fame or fortune or how many people know your name. It's how you treat the people nobody else sees. That's the Dean Martin story they should tell. Not the singer, not the actor, not the king of cool with the martini glass and the easy charm. The man who drove himself to a janitor's funeral. The man who wrote a check for $50,000 and a note that said, "For Joey, who saw me when I was invisible." The man who understood, really understood, that we rise by lifting others, even the ones the world has forgotten, especially the ones the world has forgotten. If this story about seeing the invisible ones moved you, subscribe and hit that thumbs up. Share with someone who works behind the scenes, the janitors, the cleaners, the night shift workers who keep the world running while everyone else sleeps. Have you ever had a stranger say something that changed your life? Let us know in the comments. Ring that notification bell for more untold stories about Dean Martin's legacy. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.